years ago, I was working on this book, Pop, and I was updating it for its paperback release, and I got swept up in that exquisite concentration state where the words were flowing out of my mind so fast my fingers could hardly keep up. Labor Day came, and I hadn't gone swimming once. And I live in a community outside of DC that has 20 pools. So I wrap up a day of consult, and I grab my goggles for some lapping and my towel for some napping, and I head out in search of a new pool. I'm driving along, and there's a pool tucked under some shade trees I hadn't noticed before. So I impulsively parked and went in. No sooner did I walk through the gates when I saw the fountain and I realized I had found the family pool. The place was packed with kids playing Marco Polo. It did my heart so good to know that kids still play Marco Polo. So I grabbed the only chaise lounge available next to a woman who was watching her 3 kids in the pool. All of a sudden, a man walked in dressed in a business suit. And the 3 kids ran over, "Daddy, Daddy." He came over, he gave the woman next to me a peck on the cheek, and then he went into the locker room to change. And a moment later, he was in the pool with his kids. And they were diving off his shoulders into the water. And they were showing him the swim strokes they learned in their lessons. And it was like the Waltons had showed up in that pool. It was a scene right out of Norman Rockwell. And all of a sudden he stops and he looks up at his wife and he said, "Hun, why don't we change our default? Why don't we meet at the pool every night after work?" And I have to admit, I held my breath. And I looked at her and I'm thinking, please say yes. And she thought about it for a moment and she said, "Why don't we?" And in that moment, he changed their default. They could forever look back at this summer as the summer they met Dad at the pool, the summer everything was right with their world. And now if you're thinking, "And Sam, what does that have to do with public speaking? What does that have to do with communication? What does that do with having to help me win buy-in to what I care about, close deals, get contracts, convince clients to go with me instead of my competitors?" What it has to do is I think that many of us are communicating with defaults. We're using techniques we've learned along the way or we were taught back in school. Techniques like tell them what you're going to tell them what you told them. Yikes. We use techniques like that and then we wonder why that client decides to go with our competitor when we know we have better products and services. I am a woman on a mission. I have spent the last 10 years of my life creating communication designs instead of defaults, so that every single time we talk, we get people's eyebrows up, they're intrigued, and they want to know more. So here's what we're going to do. I've cherry-picked 2 of my best practice techniques. These are techniques that I use with Cisco, Intel, Capital One, around the world. And we're going to talk about a situation coming up where you want to win buy-in. What is a communication where you're going to be meeting with a potential client, where you're going to be meeting with a strategic partner, where you're going to be meeting with potential investors, and at the end of that meeting, you want them to be intrigued, you want them to be impressed, you want them to decide to invest in you or do business with you or give you their account. What we're going to talk about are the 2 defaults and then the 2 designs. And default number 1. Tell them what you're going to tell them what you told them. Wrong. Carrie Fisher said, "Instant gratification takes too long." If we tell people what they're going to hear, 60 seconds into it, they're already reaching for their smartphones. The default, never again are we going to open a communication by telling people what we're going to tell them. What's the design? From this day forward, you're going to start your communications with 3 did you know questions that get their eyebrows up. Now, let me tell you a story, and then I'll tell you how you can do it for your communication. I'm the pitch coach for Springboard Enterprises. Springboard has helped entrepreneurs receive $5 billion in venture capital. This is Robin Chase of Zipcar, Gail Goodman of Constant Contact. One of my clients, Kathleen Callender of PharmaJet, came to me all upset because she had 10 minutes to pitch at the Paley Center in New York City. The room was going to be filled with investors. And she came up to me and said, 10 minutes? You can't say anything in 10 minutes. She said, how can I explain my invention? How can I explain my competitive edge, my exit strategy, our team credentials? She said, Sam, you can't say anything in 10 minutes. I said, Kathleen, you don't have 10 minutes. You have 60 seconds. Because you're going in the afternoon, they will have heard 20 startups before you. Their eyes will be glazed over. You've got 60 seconds to get their eyebrows up. Here is the 60-second opening we came up with for Kathleen Callender of PharmaJet. Now, before we worked together, if you ask Kathleen what she did, she's talking about subcutaneous inoculations. I tell you what the heck. See, our eyebrows were knit or furrowed. And when we tell people what we do and their eyebrows are knit or furrowed, it means they didn't get it. And if they didn't get it, we don't get it. So from now on, what we're going to do is we're going to use these 3 did you knows. Here are the 60-second opening that helped her land millions of dollars of contracts and also be selected as Business Week's most promising social entrepreneur of 2010. Did you know there are 1.8 billion vaccinations given every year? Did you know half of those are given with reused needles? Did you know we are spreading and perpetuating the very diseases we're trying to prevent? Imagine if there were a one-use needle that was painless, that was a fraction of the current cost. You don't have to imagine it. We've created it. In fact, as this article shows, and she's off and running. Now we're 60 seconds into it, and are your eyebrows up? So please think of this communication. Here are 3 steps you can use to get people's eyebrows up. And just do it right now. Please arch your eyebrows. Just lift them up. Do you feel intrigued, like you want to know more? It means we just got our venture, our idea in your mental door. So step number 1, don't tell them anything. Ask 3 did you know questions they don't know. Who are your decision makers? What don't they know about the scope of the problem? What don't they know about the urgency of the issue? What don't they know about the size of the market? What could you introduce that is startling, that was just reported in Wall Street Journal? A recent research that proves the validity, the veracity of what it is you're saying. Because if you start with 3 did you knows that they don't know, you have already earned their interest in the first 60 seconds because they know something they didn't know 1 minute before. Now the next step is the word imagine. Because when we use the word imagine, we are engaging right brain. Now they are seeing what you're saying. They are picturing your point, so they are fully engaged instead of preoccupied or checking their BlackBerry. Now use the word imagine and link it with 3 aspects of your ideal solution. What is the best case scenario and what are 3 benefits? With Kathleen, what did her decision makers care about? Well, with the vaccination, they're caring about pain, so it became painless. They care about those reused needles, so it became one use. They care about money, so it was a fraction of the current cost. Do you see how we distilled into one sentence an ideal solution? And people are thinking, who wouldn't want that? So, 3 things they don't know. Imagine this. People are thinking, I'd love for that. And now bridge with the 3rd step. You don't have to imagine it. We've created it. It's called, you don't have to imagine it, exist. In fact, and now come in with your proof or your precedence. Come in with your testimonial. Come in with your product demonstration. Come in with a real life example so that you're proving this is not pie in the sky. This is not speculative. This exists. And in 60 seconds, you have those eyebrows up, people intrigued, and you're off and running. Okay, now that's one. Old default, tell them what you're going to tell them. New default, ask 3 did you know questions that get the eyebrows up. Let's go on to default and design number 2, and then you're actually going to have a chance to put this into practice. Okay, default number 2. Win buy-in by explaining your products and services and flooding them with facts and figures. A March 4th issue of Newsweek was entitled Brain Freeze. And the premise of the article was, our society is suffering from infobesity. We do not want more information. We have all the information we want anytime we want for a click of a button. We want epiphanies. And we do not get epiphanies from information, we get them from real life examples. So the old default over here is explain your products and services and flood them with facts and figures. Our design, how we communicate in a way that wins buy-in, that helps instead of hurts, is to illustrate the value of what we offer with the dog on a tanker story. And now you're thinking, dog on a tanker story, what's that? Washington Post wrote about a tanker that had caught fire 800 miles off the Hawaii coast. A cruise ship happened to be going by and were able to rescue the 11 people on board. And when the captain got back to Hawaii, he gave a press conference and he talked about how grateful he was to be rescued. All he could think about was his dog, Hockget, that had been left behind, abandoned on that tanker. That press conference went viral. In fact, donations started flooding in from around the world. $5 donations, $500 donations, $5,000 donations. The U.S. Navy changed the exercise area of the Pacific Fleet to search the open ocean. They found the tanker. They sent a C-140 to fly low to see if there's any signs of life. There's a brown and white blur racing up and down the deck of the tanker. The U.S. Coast Guard mounts a $250,000 rescue mission to get that dog. And they are able to successfully bring him back to Hawaii. And now what's the point? The point is, why did people from around the world mobilize to save one dog? When there are thousands of people in our own cities, in our own states or countries that are going without food, water, and shelter. It's because of something called the empathy telescope. And the empathy telescope says we can put ourselves in the shoes of one person, we cannot put ourselves in the shoes of many. We often care more about one person than the stories of thousands or even millions. And now what does this mean for you? This communication you've got coming up, were you going to talk about the thousands of people who use your products or services? Were you going to be talking about the millions of satisfied customers? Because when we use big numbers, the mind shuts down. Because people can't see it, they can't relate to it, they don't care about it. Here's my question to you. What is your dog on a tanker story? Instead of trying to explain your products and services, who is one person who is better off because they've used your product? Who is one client who has scaled their success because of your services? If you put us in the shoes of that one person so we can see them, now we relate to you, now we remember you, now chances are we want to work with you. Now, let me give a quick example about that, and then it's almost time for me to wrap up. I was speaking at a conference. I sat down next to a gentleman. His name was Tom Toohey. I said, Tom, what's an example of what you do? Because if you would like to fast forward past superficial chit-chat, don't say, what do you do? Say, give me an example of what you do, and they'll tell you their dog on a tanker story. So I said, Tom, what's an example of what Dreams for Kids does? And he thought about it for a moment, and he said, well, we take kids with autism, we take kids in wheelchairs, we take kids and we get them off the sidelines and into the game of life. For example, there was a young man named JJ who was playing hockey when he was 17. He was blocked into the boards. He broke his neck, and he became an instant quadriplegic. And after months of rehab and surgery, JJ became active in our programs called Extreme Recess. But our organization is called Dreams for Kids. And JJ's dream was to go to Mexico for spring break so he could be a regular college kid. So Tom Toohey and Dick Merritt took JJ to Mexico, and on their last day there, they saw a brochure on the table that talked about swimming with dolphins. And JJ said, I want to try that. And so with Tom supporting JJ on one side and Dick on the other, they took JJ into the lagoon, and the trainer let in the female dolphin, and she came and she circled the group, and she came back and she stopped right in front of JJ. And she scanned him with her sonar. Because, see, her sonar was picking up that there's something different about his body, and she couldn't figure it out. And she started getting agitated, and JJ just looked at Tom and said, I don't want to cause problems. Just take me out of the pool. Thankfully, the trainer was compassionate. He said, let's bring in her boyfriend. Let's see what happens. So they brought in the male dolphin, and he too came in, and he circled the group, and he came back, and he stopped. He scanned JJ. He got irritated. He went over. He started talking, clicking away with the female dolphin. JJ, who has a great sense of humor, looked up at Tom and said, wonder who they're talking about. And then the female dolphin came back, stood on her tail, put out her flippers, leaned in, and gave JJ a kiss. I said, Tom, you've got to write that book. He said, what book? I said, Kiss of a Dolphin. He said, Sam, he said, I'm not an author, I'm a lawyer, I run a nonprofit. I said, Tom, what is the mission for your organization? He said, it's to let people know that people in wheelchairs are just like us. They just happen to be sitting down. I said, then if as a result of writing that book and telling JJ's story, one person walks up to someone in a wheelchair and says hi instead of walking on by, will it be worth telling that story? Tom wrote that book. It premiered to 1,000 people at Chicago's Soldier Field. And guess who was sitting on the stage with the book in his lap, with the picture on the cover of him being kissed by a dolphin? JJ. Now, if you'd like the rest of that story and how that story has helped Tom Toohey get thousands of dollars of sponsorship for his nonprofit when many nonprofits are shutting their doors, I hope to see you in my workshop tomorrow at 10:30. In fact, if you would like a handout with some of the quotes on how to win buy-in, if you'd like to brainstorm or strategize your priority project, stop me in the halls. I'd love to talk with you about how we can use these ideas to help other people care about what you care about, or we'll see you at that program 10:30 tomorrow morning. I'm Sam Horn, the Intrigue expert. Hope you found this interesting and useful.